Welcome to my channel where we talk about Mors and Thy from 1599 to 1799. And today I have a big announcement to make about European golf. And also I have a story about an event happening in Dover, around Dover Kiel, involving as crown witness a member of this parish, Helligsø, called Knud Andersen. And what we have to do today is to try to aid our audience in finding where we are. And to do that, the broader audience may be people related to this area from very far. And when we don't know how to say, we don't have a fixed way of saying North Sea, which in Danish is West Sea or Vesterhavet, or in other languages could be German Sea, and so on and so forth. We may have to find a more broad and more manageable terminology for this event. We can call it an event. And my proposal today is European Strait, or Europæiske Stræde, or even European Gulf. And it can be seen on this map. And that is the counterpart to Mediterranean Sea, which is an intercontinental sea, as it is between the continent of Africa, the continent of Europe, and the continent of Asia. Whereas this is an inter-European, our Gulf here is an inter-European affair or event. So you may have an area with a beach or connection directly to this Gulf, or you may have a beach or a river or a lake system connecting or bordering down into this system. Nevertheless, it's all the same area, full of small populations and ethnicities and so on and so forth, which we can all put under this broad brush stroke, the European Gulf. So welcome to this, and today we will just look at the map of Thy and just see where we are. We are in Helligsø at the very south of Thy. We have a beach directly down to the Limfjord, the lake system here in North Jutland. And we also have what is special, a ravine system, subdividing this Helligsø area into multiple small areas, all of them hilly in the sense of a few dozen meters tall. There is one dividing part, which is a high lake system, which separates Helligsø from the neighboring Getterup. Getterup almost encompasses all of Helligsø as it is surrounding Helligsø in most of the areas. Ydby is another part adjacent to this Helligsø. And this topography, where there's multiple ways of subdividing this area, makes it also hard to name the different hills and areas and separate them from one another. It looks like the village system, we could call it like this, has been changing and migrating around the area for quite a bit. And even the large farm, Helligsø Gård, is very hard to locate, both the original buildings, if you could call them like that, and also the farmlands or forest or any moor system which connects to this farm. It looks like it has been Helligsø Gård around Helligsø Church, and then sometimes separated in a northern farm and a southern farm. and even an east and west part of this Helligsø Gård. And further to complicate things, the vicarage, the priest's farm, is not as big and strong farm at the time we are talking about 1599, 1799. It looks like it is being financially supported by taxation rather than the size, a sizable farm. It's a tiny farm compared to other priest farms in this area. So with this, I like to dive a little further into the church and the priest and the administration of this area. And what we find is that the matriculus for this area is very detailed, but very hard to subdivide into farms for sure. The baseline to do this is 1787, where we both had the census, a detailed census of everybody in this area with wives and children and so on and so forth. We have the entire structure of the village in place, and we have this supported by a taxation document from 1788, 1 year later, and further detailed documents around here. But even with this and a detailed map collaborating this from around 1814, it's still very hard to determine how the farms has migrated and they are exactly located. So that will be another time we will be able to do this. So for now, we just have a complex structure which makes not much sense. We do have a detailed map which by its topography and subdivisions of the fields suggest a location for Helligsø Gård, both the north of the current town of Helligsø and south of the current town, but it doesn't help us a lot and does not fix the way we should maybe understand Helligsø Gård. The church has been a tiny church, like many of the churches up here in rock stone facade. It got its tower very recently, after the year 1900. We do have pictures from before it got the tower, and it has a long story like all the other churches. But in this case, we do not have a lot of writing inside the church to help us in our genealogy for this area. The only big thing is we have an inscription for the owner of Skibsted Gård, who seems to have vested interest in this church. Normally, Skibsted Gård would be more interested in the adjacent church to Skibsted Gård, which is Ydby Church. But there seems to have been a family very interested in Helligsø Church around, when is it, around late 1700s. So the church do have some interesting features. I'm not saying it's not interesting, lots of it, but it's not helping us in terms of genealogy. I find the paintings on the walls here very interesting, even it's fragmented, and we can study that later. Further, the priests we have from this church is very well researched in terms of genealogy, all the way back to Anders Jensen Mus in the late 1600s. But before that, we have not much genealogy in place. There's a big work to get done there. Also, the school teacher, we know it is related to Helligsø, and we know there has been schooling in Helligsø but mostly it is related to the twin parish Getterup. And I talked about this in the Getterup Parish review on my channel. But there is one new thing about this, which is Jens Pedersen died from 1617. We just recently found in Viborg Landsting that his son has killed a member of the parish. So in 1617, Jens Pedersen died is former school principal, and that's quite dramatic and a long story we could take another time. So with this, let me see. Yeah, with this we will dive into the rest of the presentation. And when we use the term crown witness, meaning he is the most important witness, this is where the story starts. So I have to accept that this story is starting in Helligsø and is just migrating around in Thy. The other thing is that if I insist having a story for Helligsø, from Helligsø, it's going to be a weak one. I haven't discovered too much trouble or stories from that area. Gettrup, the neighbor parish I had for the previous video, stories are adding up. Now the school principal, his son has killed a student, I think it was, in around 16 or some year like that. So that's a developing story. But Helligsø is absolutely nothing except this Knud Andersen. He is witness, and he witnessed what was going on. The funny thing about this story is that nothing is really going on. But it gives us a tremendous insight into the environment around 1698. And what has happened is the Christian Christensen was asleep at home. Some thieves tried to break in. They were disturbed, among others, by our Knud Andersen, who was using the place as a hotel for the night. And the thieves had to leave in a hurry, and what they left behind was 2 sacks. These 2 sacks are very peculiar. So it was clear for everybody, and sacks are very expensive at the time. It takes quite a time to weave a sack. They knew it belonged, these 2 sacks belonged to Jørgen Deichmann. And he is now called on the witness stand to explain himself, because what they are thinking is the Crown, which runs a case as judge for the 2 farmers who are on Crown land, they have figured out what they will do is they will call Jørgen Deichmann and make him confess that these sacks are his. And this will solve the case. He got to be the thief. And then this case is solved. But this is not how it turns out. How things turns out is that Jørgen Deichmann, he is one of ours, meaning he's not opposed to what we can call the farmer business, where everybody is not paying tax, and everybody is fighting crown taxation and all this. He is a solid member of the local community, but we will figure that out later. So let's start the case. 2 men who called for the witness to stand, Laurits Nielsen Helborg and Peter Andersen. They, with raised fingers and oath, according to the law, meaning if they lied, people will cut their fingers. They, a few days ago, summoned Jørgen Deichmann in Dover, together with his wife and children, and whoever will act as guardians for wife and children, maybe himself, here to court to hear the witnesses and the charges, and to hear and further to answer questions. And they may be required to explain how come some fish and grain in a sack in Christian Christensen's house happened to be at his barn floor. So what we are looking at here in this story is we are looking at the court documents, which means that the robbery took place about a week ago, so on April 7 at night, and today is Thursday the 14th. So we are having that the who is acting as attorney is Ejler Madsen. He comes from Ydby, from Brændegård. So he will be repeated a few times. And then you have to remember Christian Christensen. He is the victim of this event, where his home and a few things has been stolen from his house. And then the accused is Jørgen Deichmann. Everybody else will come in as needed. So Ejler Madsen, on behalf of Crown Horseman Christian Christensen in Revsgård in Hurup, it's not far from Ydby. So now Knud Andersen is taking the stand. He is from Helligsø, and he also won with upright fingers and an oath according to the law that he came to Revsgård 8 days ago in the evening at Christian Christensen's farm, and in the evening he wanted to sleep there, and that he was allowed to use the house as lodging. And then during the night he suddenly heard the dog barking and woke up and saw the following event unfold in front of him. The man found his knives and stood up and looked out. That's Christian Christensen. And then he left and shouted to his wife, who went out? And no one went out. So then he wanted to walk around the barn and came around the wrong side of the barn and finally came in from the south. And there he saw the barn was broken into. And he searched for the man inside there, but he also heard someone fleeing. And then he found this famous sack on the floor, 2 sacks. Detail described here. One was full of barley and what is that, grain, and the other one had trouts in it. So further, Knud Andersen observed that the sack full of trouts looked like the trouts were taken from the ceiling and put into this sack, and the grain also. So both of them were clear of the row of events. So Knud Andersen further observed that the 2 sacks, one was full with trout and the other one full of grain, were on the floor, and it seems like the grain and the trouts came from Christian Christensen's ceiling up there and was taken down. So everybody had observed the sequence of events there. And then they ran over to Gregers Lassen, the neighbor, and also another neighbor, Jørgen, what is his name? Jørgen Lassen, and which actually appeared at the court today and confirmed the sequence of events as it happens. So then the next witness comes up, which is Jens Enevoldsen, and he lives in another farm called Dovergård, and he won that it was evident to him that a captain from Nibe, the aforementioned captain, whose name is also Christensen, to confuse everybody, they were in yet another farm called Kortegård, meaning the short farm. And there, it seems that Christensen sort of lived on top of a coffin lid. And he also appeared for the court. And they talk about yet another person called Peter Gadegaard in Dover, where they were for a short period of time. And there Gregers Lauritsen and Revsgaard came to his house, Peter Gadegaard's house, and talk about the sacks. And they saw these sacks, and everybody agreed they belonged to. And then they wanted to figure out how these trouts came into being. And what they are hearing is that it seems that Christensen has been the one catching those, and he hanged those fish up in the Dover Guard on Saturday. So everybody has agreed, the sacks and the trouts, and that's part of the story. So now we will witness an unusual move. We are moving forward a few weeks to April 28th, which is also a Thursday, for the next court hearing. So everybody has been home, and now they are coming back in, and with new energy. And the first thing which happens is the attorney or the investigator, Ejler Madsen, request Jørgen Deichmann to not make any unreasonable moves on his property, in particular of assets such as grain and so on. He's not allowed to move it or do anything to it because he owes in tax, and now this case. So he's just forbidding him to move anything around, which is a quite unusual move. So it seems that the population at this time is stressed out about these two sacks found in Christensen Lade, and they are kind of thinking that it might be him. So now Ejler Madsen in Brengard, he is accusing Jørgen Deichmann in Dover for a few things. First, he is called by Laurits Christensen in Helborg and Niels Nielsen, same place, who confirms that they have called him to the court today, and he is also present, so that's good. And he wants to accuse Jørgen Deichmann to be the thief who stole the things in the sacks on Christensen's floor in his barn that day, regardless that Christensen has plead his innocence and said, this is the nonsense, I was home with my children. And he promised to try to prove that. And then further a summary of the case, which we are all familiar with. And today is yet another host of witnesses called in. Jens Christensen, Ansels, Gadegaard, we mentioned before, Inger Forstkone, Amor Poulsen, who was mentioned before, and the military guy, Schaffwind. Further, Mathias Doe, Inger Andersdatter, or a few others. So further, we have now Kvartermester Schaffwind from Helborg in, and he has reported that he was known, Jørgen Deichmann was known for some years, and he has behaved as an honest and good fellow. So he's a character witness. Then comes forward another witness, Mathias Doe from Dover Gård. And he is a writer lying in Dover Gård, who, by oath and raised fingers and so on and so forth, that 2 hours before the evening on April 1st, he and his wife from Bodum, they saw Jørgen Deichmann's family fishing on the fjord of Dover Kiel with fishing nets, together with a guy called Jens Smed and his son Simon Jensen, as well as Emma Poulsen and a girl called Anne. But whether Jørgen Deichmann was on the boat or not, or home or not, he did not know. Then comes Mathias Daah's wife, Inger Andersdatter. She said the same as her husband, and yeah, there's not much she is can add to this. She also don't know if Jørgen Deichmann was on the boat or not. Then comes Emma Poulsen, who seems to have been on the boat, and he won that Mathias Daah and his wife came home from Dover Kiel in the evening well before. Like, what kind of witness statement is that? I think he was on a boat. So the final witness today, Jørgen Deichmann was asked if he agreed that he was not home, and or he had more witnesses to talk about where he was, and he said, "No, I have no more witnesses." But he claimed to be innocent of the charges, and also Eiler Madsen asked him to, again, not to remove any property from his place, neither creditors nor grain or nothing, because he owes in taxes and he has to wait for the outcome of this court case. And Jørgen Deichmann promises to stick to this. So luckily for Jørgen Deichmann, another case appears a few weeks later. And that's a case where probably a family member of Jørgen Deichmann's in Oldby, way down to the south, he has been kind of helping this family to empty the farm for valuables, so no taxation was possible. And he's not accused for anything. He's just mentioned in connection with this case, together with a bunch of other people, among others, some of the people from Dover, Peter Gadegaard and Enevold Hansen, who must be related to the other Enevoldsen. So what we can conclude is that this case kind of confirms in the mind of the local farming community that he is on the right side. He is fighting the crown regarding taxation, but he is not fighting the local farming community. He is on the right side of everything, regardless his name is Deichmann, which may have sounded a little foreign to them, for instance, German. So this leads us to a few weeks later, again on June 30th, also a Thursday, where the judge has requested Christian Christensen, the victim in Revsgard, to show up, and Jørgen Deichmann has been called to show up by Mads Jensen and Michael Christensen. And the verdict is very hard to read because of the aforementioned missing part of the pages, and it's really hard to read these verdicts anyway. But there's no mentioning of that he is being found guilty at all. It seems like the judge has talked his way out of this case and is happy to let it go. So that's the way it seems to end. So in summary, I have to conclude that this case is about that Jørgen Deichmann really is not local, whereas everybody else, more or less, is local. But there was a few other ones coming in from outside, Mr. Christian Christensen, the captain from Nibe, and a few others, Knud Andersen from Helligsø. So what they basically did was they jumped to conclusion about the two sacks and tried to accuse Jørgen Deichmann, but he was impeccable. It showed later. both through his captain, the military captain, who his testimony on his character, and later that Jørgen Dijkman, he proved to be a true member of the community in the case against some relatives or whoever it was, making tax evasion in Aalby. So in doing so, we never figured out who was the thief. We just recovered the grain and the trouts. And Jørgen Dijkman, he stayed in town for the next 25 years. His wife died 15 years later, and he died 25 years later in the same town.